Welcome to you all, clients and employees of the Groof Peterkam. Welcome to this series of conversations with which the Groof Peterkam wants to look ahead and reflect on the idea of responsible prosperity for all from different perspectives. This conversation is part of a series of events to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Groof Peterkam. And being more than a bank, the Groof Peterkam supports innovation, puts its shoulders under entrepreneurship, looks forward and aims at sustainable investments. Now, not so much looking back at the past, but the Groof Peterkam wants to keep an eye on the future. We want to inspire you today with this conversation between two people from totally different backgrounds, but who have an ambitious common goal to give younger generations the chance and the freedom to come up with solutions for a new society. I welcome evolutionary biologist Karin van Donink and conceptual artist Koen van Mechelen. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Karin, can you briefly introduce yourself and explain us how you, as an evolutionary biologist, got involved in a project with Koen van Mechelen?
So I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist in evolutionary biology. And so I'm a full professor at the University of Namur and Université Libre de Bruxelles, where I have scientists in my laboratory doing all kinds of experiments on evolutionary questions around rotifers. But besides a passion for science, I also have a passion for art. And so since more than 3 years now, I have combined this passion. So I have artists interacting in my laboratory with scientists. And so the aim of this interaction is really to cross these disciplines and really to think further. So also bring our scientific discoveries into new perspective and into a broader context. And this interaction has been really interesting. And I think that's also the reason that I got contacted by the VUB rector Caroline Pauwels to participate in this unthinkable experiment with Koen van Mechelen. And also because it's all about young people here in the unthinkable experiment, I'm also a teacher. And it's very important for me when I go into interaction with my students is that I share knowledge. But I also want them to become critical. They are the next generation. And you will see that everything in the unthinkable experiment is about this critical thinking of the future.
Now, you said something interesting there. Artists coming to your lab. What do they do there?
Yeah, so they go in interaction with my scientists. And for example, we have rotifers that were sent to space. So I have several experiments that are sent to space.
So very small
very microscopic organisms that are only females that clone themselves. So we shown that, in fact, for their evolution, males are not necessary. And still they create variability. So this is a paradox in evolution. And I love when we study paradoxes. And so we send them to space because they are a model organism for space research, because these females can survive complete dryness, but also extreme radiation. And what's the problem when you are a long time in space is that you're exposed to cosmic radiation. And this creates damages to your DNA, to your cell, to your genetic material. So these organisms, they can survive high doses of radiation.
And do they have damage then?
Yeah, they have damage, but they repair it.
Okay.
So we study that they repair it. So we really now do these experiments in space to really look at the impact of space on living organisms. And since they can survive, they are a very good model organism to study what's the impact on the genetic material. And so I got into contact with a collective of artists, SEEDS, so Space Ecology, Art and Design, who are thinking about artistic work with space. And they were immediately enthusiastic about clonality and these questions, because they immediately brought this context of clonality towards cultural immortality. We are very much, Homo sapiens likes to really be attached to their culture. And somehow it's in contradiction with creating diversity. And these organisms, they are cloning themselves, but still they need to create diversity for evolution. So there is this paradox, and these artists love this paradox too. So we have been working on this paradox with these artists, and they have been able, with a collaboration with ESA to send the first artwork to space. So they have sent, together with our experiment, an artwork to space.
Okay.
This artwork is coming back, and now this artwork is evolving with the scientific data. So they are using our scientific data to have the artwork evolve towards artificial intelligence, and then show, in fact, the impact of space on living organism through art. And so this is now ongoing, and this artwork is ongoing, and also it reflects, because we start to think also about, for example, how sure are we about our data? That's an important question about scientists, and nowadays with COVID also.
Yeah.
How are we certain? Because the tools, we are biased by the tools we use, and the tools are made by human too. And so it's very interesting, because these artists make us ourselves reflect, we scientists, how sure are we about our data? And I start to even write my papers with a critical mind, really like, I should be careful how I present this. And I have even realized that some of our experiments of 10 years ago, we are contradicting now because we have new tools. So we have to remain critical. So that's what I mean, these interactions between disciplines, really criticizing each other, makes you think much further.
Okay.
And that's what I love about it.
Yeah, interesting. Koen, most people know you from the Cosmopolitan Chicken project,
Correct,
in which you crossbreeded domesticated chickens from all over the world to make a statement about diversity. Can you tell a bit more about that and about LaMouseion?
Yeah. Well, the Cosmopolitan Chicken is actually the big project that I'm always doing every year. I crossbreed another country. So you have to go back to the beginning of this project. There is only one chicken in the world, which is the red jungle fowl that lives in the Himalaya. And from there, it is spread all over the globe. And by human interest, actually, and by manipulation, it became a chicken that was not only there for consumption, but it's also there for aesthetical reasons. I give you an example. In China, they make a fluffy chicken, so the idea is silk. So you put some kind of culture inside of a living object. France, they make the poulet de Bresse, red in the head, white in the body, and blue legs. Why I'm telling this? Because, you know, from there, the art starts. It's a culture. It becomes culture. And then I was thinking, can we do this? Are we allowed to do that? I mean, to create something, and then we like to keep it like the French flag of like a fluffy chicken. And then my solution was, no, we have to break frames to get diversity. And I think it's an important movement. So I started to present this in museums, in galleries all around the globe, and I started to crossbreed. So, and when you crossbreed and you break the frames, you know, you tell something about diversity, fertility, genetic engineering, but also all the things that we are struggling in society, like globalization, you know, multiculturalism, all this kind of social project that we are struggling.
It's very similar to what...
It is very simple, because when I hear this,
Yes.
first I feel the passion. For me, that's what we share, scientists and artists. But you know, you understand that this project is a very big project. So after 30 years, I was able to create LaMouseion, which is actually a word that I invented, and it is the mix of life, actually, when you translate it. And what is LaMouseion? It's a place, and it's on the border between the village, the city, and on the other side, there is what I call the jungle, but it's the only national park that we have. And in between, we are there, and that's art. Art is the zone, and also when I'm listening there, the conflict zone. What is happening? And when you come to LaMouseion, you will discover the part that we talk about humanity and the conflict of nature and culture. Then you see what humanity did with nature, which is quite interesting, but it's in another form. You see that the crossbreeding of the chickens, of course, but also that I was working with llamas and camels. And then you start to understand that nature is a library. And in one way or another, you have to respect this. You have to understand, if we start to ruin that, instead of learning from it, we will go down. So LaMouseion is actually a trip. and it takes you from a domesticated world into the nature and let you think about the position. And that's for me important, because just on the border, when you leave the domestic world, we have LaMouseion. And LaMouseion is the place where you can think. And that reminds me when I do my trips in Africa, for example, and I go to the Maasai. They live on the border of society and jungle, so on the Serengeti. And if you look to the LaMouseion, it's like a little village where we try to bring young people together to think the unthinkable. Because if you go to La Biomista and you see all the projects that I did in 30 years, that was 30 years ago unthinkable. We were not thinking about diversity, communities, mixing. It was all about pureness. It was all about being regular, go between the lines, not trying
Sticking
to find
one's own culture.
Yeah, not trying to find borders, because borders, that's bad. You have to stay inside, safe. And what we are doing now together is really saying, try to get offline. try to understand what we have to do for the future. Something like this.
Yes. So the unthinkable experiment, it's like being in a box, but not being in a box. What's it about?
Well, what's about? I mean, the unthinkable experiment comes from two sides. One side is that more than 10 years ago, I started with my Open University of Diversity. So the idea of crossbreeding and all the big issues that we know in society, I started to make foundations. With these foundations, we start to create something in communities all over the globe. For example, in Ethiopia, or in Zimbabwe, or in Detroit, the chickens start to, the cosmopolitan chicken, which now is a very sustainable chicken, start to crossbreed with a chicken on the spot. And that gives a combination between diversity and productivity. And what is important, that it is sustainable to live in communities, in poor communities, and gives people every day an egg. It's a very simple thing, but it's something that liberates people and gives people food. So started from an artwork in all the freedom in our foundations, which was under the leading of Georges Cassiman, as we know as a geneticist. We saw that all of a sudden there are more genetics there. There are more DNA, not new DNA, of course, but copies of the DNA. So made the book of genomes. And with that, we could go further. So actually, this whole unthinkable thing gives an inspiration that everything can be done in the future if we rethink the things and if we have the critical mind. And also if we have the freedom to be critical. That's also important.
Yes, Gerrin, how do you as a scientist participate in this unthinkable experiment?
But first of all, there is the scientist and the teaching, and the art, the interaction. So I'm really in favor of that transdisciplinarity. But what I realize in a university setting and in our educative system also in Belgium is that often what we do, maybe too much, is that the academic is giving the knowledge to the students in one way. And what I was very interested when discussing with Koen is that we think different way here, because you still have this young generation who is critical, free spirits. They maybe have a bit of naive mind, but they want to fight for the future, and we have seen it. And so now it's time to also give them the free spirit to think and to learn what they mean. For example, the first topic will be freedom, what it means for them, freedom. Nowadays, with social media, etc., what is it, freedom? So they will start writing the course. Instead of us, the academics, writing the course, let's the younger ones write or show it through a theater play. We haven't decided. They can use any media to express themselves. And they will give feedback to a transdisciplinary team, to maybe more specialists in different disciplines. And this will feed back to the young people. So I really like that here, maybe, and we don't do maybe enough in a university setting, while still I go a lot in interaction with my students, my scientists, these artists. Here it's really the idea that the young ones will write the knowledge.
Why specifically the young people?
Because of this free spirit. And don't forget, we are and that's important, and we artists and scientists think like that. You need to think long term. We are facing a global issue. It's maybe not so far anymore, but it's still long-term thinking. And so we need this new generation to think about it. We might not be there. We need to have this critical mind also with the young generation. And so I really want that they think. Also, in all this COVID period, we have a lot the specialists who talks, and maybe not enough the young ones. And this is an opportunity for them to think about freedom, but the young ones, and to write about it. And what I really hope is that they will write, like Koen was saying, offline, out of the box. So not only about freedom of a pandemic. We need to think further. Because what I'm missing in all this debate of COVID and pandemic is the origin of the virus. Where does it come from? Are we thinking about our system, why it originated? What's critical about the whole system, the economic system, maybe the industrial system, whatever, the entire system? Are we willing to rethink it? And I'm not sure our generation is willing to rethink it, so maybe the young generation is willing to do it. So let's let them talk about it and speak about it and write about it.
So they come to the La Biomista, where the boxes are.
Yeah.
They come together to reflect, to think, and to leave something behind.
Yeah, that's actually because the Open University of Diversity, you know, where LaMouseion is part of, you have to think LaMouseion is actually an idea that comes from Alexandria
The library.
the very famous library. And so for us, it's very important that when students are coming, or young people are coming, and they start to think that they leave something for the library. And I tell you what is very important, and we don't know at this moment what can be important for the future. But if we have something where we can look back after many years, when I started to tell about 2 chickens to crossbreed, everybody was like, what is the guy telling a chicken as being a piece of art? But look so many years later, what it does, what it can give people. And that's because of the freedom, what it has. It has the content of freedom. And these boxes, I have to say, when there was no COVID, there were no boxes. Because these boxes are created as a window to the freedom. It's a quarantine of freedom. And that contains the contradiction. And in the contradiction of thinking, you find the new things. I'm sure for that. Because all my life is like this.
Yeah.
I'm like this.
In an ideal world, what do you hope to achieve with the experiment?
First of all, I think it is important that you can live in a crisis. An artist is continuously in crisis. This is the ideal ocean to swim in. And I think like the Greek were saying, that the crisis is an opportunity. And we have to find the opportunity in the crisis. And not to see it as something that is bad, but just to see it now, and I'm totally agree with Karin, that we have to listen to the young people now. Because they are pushing the boundaries today. We are critical about it because we are thinking about the world. And I understand this, but they are pushing the boundaries continuously, and that is also with their thinking, because they have this free spirit of thinking, and this is like artists and scientists are doing, and in the combination of that, we will find new solutions.
Okay, Karin, what is the key message that you would like our audience to take away?
If I can dream, and I will. Maybe I hope we go to a new revolution. So we know if we look at human evolution, and we started 200, 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens in Africa, we all migrated. That's what we sometimes forget, that we all come from the same place. We are all immigrants. We are one big species. So I'm always nervous when we talk about problems of immigrants and race. For me, this doesn't exist. We are all a mix. We all have genetic material that is shared from Africa. But during this evolution of Homo sapiens, we had different revolutions. And we talk sometimes about the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and I hope we go to a new sustainable revolution.
And what is for you the key message?
The key message is, first of all, everything what is unthinkable is thinkable. Actually, there is no fiction. Everything what the human mind can think about shall exist maybe now or in the future. So never stop. So this is the real drive, this is the real energy that there is. And another thing, what I think is very important, probably the most unthinkable at this moment is the pandemic in itself. Could you realize that we could say, let's stop 1 month flying, driving?
We did.
We did it, and it was unthinkable. So there is always something which is not in ourselves, but which is in our environment, who can tell us what we have to do. So it's always a combination, and it's always this duality which is so important. So trigger yourself to change your environment. Come in the box, for example.
Okay, that's an invitation. Thank you very much, Koen van Mechelen, Karin van Doning, for your passion and your enthusiasm and your insights, of course. And thank you, the audience and viewers and listeners, for joining us, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.